Sir, and why esophageal cancer is increasing day by day in human life?
Is a very complex process.
Sir, can these foods is really act as a prevention?
Critical for this is my rule of thumb.
Food habits, so that directly connected to cancer.
Cancer cell is producing only two. So cancer cells are
What if the food on your plate could protect you from cancer? At Cybercity Builders, we believe healthy homes begins with healthy lives. That's why we have joined our hands with Dr. Mahaveer Swaroop, who's refining healthcare with his simple yet powerful belief: food is medicine. This interview is conducted on the occasion of National Cancer Awareness Day to spread awareness about the power of food in preventing and healing the cancer.
Hello, Dr. Mahaveer Swarup, sir. Welcome to my podcast.
Oh, my pleasure, sir. Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, and why esophageal cancer is increasing day by day in human life? Is there any specific food behind that?
To your question, to understand that question, we have to understand that cancer initiation and progression is a very complex process. The factors that involve them are genetics, and which I personally feel hasn't undergone major changes. The genetic scenario among the population has not increased significantly. But what has changed are the environmental factors: the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. And they also have a significant influence on the oncogenesis or the cancer initiation. So, in my opinion, the increase in cancer we see is a significant increase on the environmental factors on our bodies, and that includes the food, water, and the air. And there is a significant amount of contaminants that we see in this environmental factors. And in my opinion, that's what is.
Sir, and what does the term food as a medicine in cancer?
So, food as medicine in cancer, for that, it's actually a very complex question and has a lot of footing in medicine itself, in therapy. The first component, if you look at in term food as medicine, is certain deficiencies. Like in India currently, like there was a study that showed around 43% of Indians have deficiency in vitamin D. Vitamin D. So food as medicine would be that you incorporate vitamin D in the diet, and that you probably can take care of the conditions associated with that deficiency. Or if you're feeling too lethargic in during daytime, it could be that there is a vitamin B12 deficiency, which is also fairly common among Indians. Somewhere around slightly more than 50% of Indians have vitamin B12 deficiency. So food as medicine could have one of that definition, that there are certain things you are deficient in and you incorporate that and you can actually correct that condition or state or disease. The other way of looking at food as medicine is what is in our food which should not be there. And for that to understand, we actually have to go back and understand why do we eat.
Yes.
So when we eat right food, currently I think the way I look around in India, it's predominantly we eat for taste.
Yes, obviously.
So you get the taste and you're eating it. That's it, right? It's like there is no consideration given as to what is the nutrient value of the food that you're eating. If you look at, like Ludwig Feuerbach, it was a German philosopher, and he said that we are what we eat. Now, what does that statement mean, that we are what we eat? To understand that statement, actually, you have to go back that when you were newly born, and if you were not eaten anything, would you grow? You would not. So basically, everything that you eat becomes part of you. So it's a very sacred event, or it's very intimate event, that from an external world, you are picking up things, ingesting it, and making it part of you. Taste is one aspect, but for your body to function as a unit, you need the nutrition, you need all the micronutrients, the vitamins that helps body function normally. So current focus is predominantly on taste, but what we need are variety of different kinds of micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and so on, various different phytonutrients, which for a particular function in the body play a very critical role. So If we eat for the energy, for our growth, then we have to be extremely careful what we ingest
Okay.
because they become part of you. And this is the general rule, right? Even when you're writing software, you say that junk in, junk out. So whenever you put in junk data, junk things will only come out.
Okay.
And same thing, if you put in, junk is what will come out. And part of the reason that we are seeing dramatic increase in various different lifestyle diseases, including obesity and the associated risk factors associated with obesity, such as diabetes, cancer, metabolic disorders like erectile dysfunction, mood disorders, and so on. All these are associated with the kind of food we eat, whether there are enough nutrients to support a particular function, or excess of certain foods that we eat that could also cause certain abnormalities.
Sir, can these foods is really act as a prevention?
Definitely.
Which foods?
So there's no one general food.
Example.
So prevention predominantly, for example, right? A hypothetical situation, a person having high blood pressure. Now, for high blood pressure, the blood vessels have become little rigid. So, if you were to take beet juice, for example, or incorporate beets in your diet on a regular basis,
Okay.
beets have something called as nitric acid. They are rich in nitrates. So, these nitrates become nitric oxide in the body. And nitric oxide is what is called as a relaxant for the arteries and the veins. So it's called as a vasodilator. It dilates the blood vessels, which means it actually tells them become more soft instead of becoming harder. And when they are soft or softer, then actually the blood flow is much more smoother. So a blood pressure can be controlled with diet when you have foods that could dilate your blood vessels.
Okay.
And there are many foods like this. Foods that are rich in arginine also can do something like this. Foods that are rich in nitric oxide or something that leads to production of nitric oxide. Alternately, you eat less of foods that could harden your blood vessel. So something like calcification of the arteries. The foods that can prevent that. So if you have foods that are rich in vitamin K, then that calcification process could be prevented. And so on. Foods that are rich in phytic acid, for example, like lots of greens. So phytic acid actually can bind to calcium, take the calcium away from the arteries,
Okay.
so that there's lesser calcification. Foods that are less in cholesterol can also lead to decrease in the or mitigate the amount of cholesterol blocks that could be seen in the arteries. So food do play a very important role. And what is critical for prevention based through food is to avoid the highly processed food.
Highly processed food.
Highly processed food, any kind of highly processed foods, predominantly, especially most of the packaged foods,
Package.
they are predominantly created for shelf life. And anything that is, this is my rule of thumb, that if you don't eat a food, so for example, let's say you take a banana, right? You eat the banana you want and you leave the banana, the rest of it at your room temperature. You will see that they attract fruit flies. If you don't eat it for 2 days, you will see that they'll start smelling. There would be fungus growing there, bacteria growing there. So in nature, it is critically important that if you don't eat it, somebody else will eat it. So bacteria will eat it, fungus will eat it, worms would come there, flies would eat it. And that is the rule in nature. But packaged foods, when you look at, they don't spoil. The biscuits, right, made 3 months earlier on the
Yes.
shelf, they don't spoil. You open and keep it. In good amount of times, bacteria also don't come because they have preservatives that would kill bacteria. The flies would not be attracted that much because they still have preservatives which could kill the flies, right? So, if a food that can stay on shelf life for a long period of time, or a food that does not get spoiled with time, it is not worth for human consumption. And that is what I think. And that is my major point that I would like to put across, that if any food is not spoiling with time. That means they have a bunch of different kinds of chemicals to preserve that state. In a natural state, food would spoil. But to preserve that spoilage, we have added a bunch of chemicals. And if we eat those chemicals, then they interfere with our bodily functions. Many of them interfere with hormones too.
Okay. Sir, name some food habits so that directly connected to cancer.
Food habits that are directly connected to cancer.
Cancer.
So, for this, let's understand the work of Otto Warburg. Otto Warburg was a German scientist, and he was working on utilization of glucose and oxygen in a cancer cell.
Okay.
And he won a Nobel Prize for it. And his work was very simple. So, as you know, right, we discussed this before, that we eat because we need energy,
Yes.
right? So, when we eat foods are actually, our digestive system breaks them down to very small components. So, complex fats are broken down to fatty acids, complex carbohydrates are broken down to simple sugars like glucose, and so forth. When these are absorbed, they go into the cells, and at cellular level, the process is called as respiration. And this is the process where energy is extracted from our food for our bodily needs. So, for example, if you look at energy extraction from glucose, the simplest carbohydrate, that is like complex carbohydrate digested in the stomach, small intestine, and then circulated into the bloodstream and supplied to a specific cell. In the cell, what happens to this glucose is glucose gets broken down. Glucose is a 6 carbon unit. It gets broken down to 3 carbon units, and it's called pyruvic acid.
Okay.
And this happens in the area of the cell called as cytoplasm. And here 2 energy units are produced. Now these 3 carbon units, pyruvic acid, they enter a special organelle in the body called mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. And in presence of oxygen, these 2 units of 3 carbon pyruvic acids are further broken down to carbon dioxide and water, and energy is released. And during this process, which is called as the Krebs cycle or oxidative phosphorylation cycle or tricarboxylic acid cycle, 34 energy units are produced.
Okay.
So in cells, glucose enters cell, cytoplasm, 2 units are produced, and you don't require oxygen for that. This broken down glucose goes into mitochondria, and there 34 units of energy are produced, and final end product is carbon dioxide and water. What Otto Warburg found, that cancer cells generally grow in the state of hypoxia. Hypoxia is an area where there is low oxygen pressure, right? So then, because the second stage of energy extraction, mitochondria requires oxygen, that is cancelled out. That does not happen because there is no oxygen.
Okay.
Only the first part happens where 2 energy units are produced. So if you look at a normal cell can produce 36 energy units, cancer cell is producing only 2.
Okay.
So cancer cells are energy inefficient, which means that they have to have a large amount of their substrate like glucose to produce. So for example, a normal cell produces 36 ATP, 36 energy units. For that much amount of energy, cancer cells will require 18 molecules of glucose because they are able to produce only 2. So what a cell can do in 1 glucose molecule, cancer cells will require 18. And cancer cells themselves are very energy hogs. They require lots of energy. So scientifically, it has been shown that the difference could be what 1 unit of glucose could do for normal cells.
Okay.
Cancer cells will require probably 100 molecules of glucose. When that happens, then cancers undergo further mutation to attract more and more glucose, right? So when it starts to attract like more and more glucose, this was the work by Otto Warburg, and he won the Nobel Prize. So we took his work and we developed what is called as a diagnostic tool. To identify where cancers are, what we do is we take glucose molecule and add a radioactive tracer to it. So now this glucose molecule is recognized by the body as glucose, but since we have removed one hydroxyl group and added a radioactive tracer, it is not metabolized.
Okay.
That means it's not broken down. So now you can monitor where it is moving and where it is localizing in the body. So this technology is called as a FDG PET, which is fluorodeoxyglucose positron emission tomography. So the second part is about the radioactive molecules that are emitted and how they are detected. So PET is that scanning technique, and the first part is the chemical that is injected, and that is actually a glucose which is modified. So basically we inject this glucose in the body, and now we are able to monitor where this glucose goes into the body and where it gets localized. And where it gets localized, doctors start to think that this could be a potential cancer site, because that site is attracting more and more glucose towards it. This is much more predominant in metabolically active cancers, and FDG PET is one of the common tools. So this is all based on the work of Otto Warburg, that cancer cells are energy inefficient. They require a higher amount of glucose to maintain their state. So if we are eating foods that spike your blood sugars, like plain sugars, for example, lots of mithais or
Sweets.
or even starches, then you are raising your blood sugar after you eat.
Can we eat sugarless sweets?
Now, sugar-free again is a very complicated word. When you say sugar-free, it is free of sugar, but are synthetic sweeteners added to it? What are you thinking about when you say sugar-free? No added sugar sweets. If you eat, then they are no longer sweets. But you have to make them sweet for them to become a sweet dish, right? So now, instead of, you cut out your regular sugar, cane sugar, sucrose, and instead you add other sugar alcohols or various different kinds of synthetic sugars that are there. If you are doing that, they have their own complications. They are known to influence heart state, and then the risk for heart attack significantly increases with the synthetic sweeteners. Whether you would like to replace with synthetic sweeteners or natural sweeteners, I would think that it's better to eat sweets with natural sweetness, but lesser in quantity. You don't spike your blood sugars that high. And in general population, right, eating small amount of sugar. World Health Organization suggests that a woman could have 25 grams of sugar a day, and men, I think, around 30 to 32 grams of sugar a day, and that in normal consumption would not cause major issues. But to put that number into perspective, right, a bottle of Coke that you drink has close to around 65 grams of sugar.
Sir, and how long our body is usually take to respond positively?
What do you mean by this? So respond positively to
Cancer.
healthy foods
Healthy food and cancer.
and cancer.
Cancer prevention.
So food as a cancer treatment, I don't think it is very prevalent.
Okay.
And part of it is majority of research is not directed towards it. So let's go back to the example of Otto Warburg. He won the Nobel Prize. Based on his Nobel Prize winning work, we have developed an imaging tool where with that tool, we can identify where cancers are. But the same philosophy or the same basis of his scientific work is not used in therapy. So we still don't tell our patients that if you eat foods that will spike your blood sugars, all that excess sugar actually feeds your cancer cells. So ideal eating for cancer patients would be that you eat with having a glucometer in your hand. Before you eat, you take your blood sugars, and after you eat, you take your blood sugars. There should not be a major difference before and after eating, and those would be the ideal foods. Now, there hasn't been study to show how much time it would take, but food as an intervention will take at least like 5 to 6 months for you to progress.
Sir, if you have to include 3 foods that every human needs regular food in his diet, then what food you will suggest?
It's impossible for me to name 3 foods. I think everything that we eat from the natural world,
Natural one.
would be very critical for our bodily function, because no single food has the complete nutrition that human beings need. So, in order for you to get the complete nutrition, you have to change your food regularly. So, that is like sometimes you have food that are rich in greens, sometimes you have foods which are rich in root vegetables, sometimes you have foods that are rich in other vegetables like tomatoes, cucumbers, and so on. Other times, carrots, before that, gongura, or different kinds of greens that you add sometimes, and in lesser quantity, probably grains and pulses. So, in my opinion, right, our eating should be in ways that there are two major reasons that we eat. One is celebratory. So, for example, if I call you for my birthday, your expectation would be that there would be food. So,
Obviously.
there are no celebrations without food. And if you have been to one celebration without food, you will remember it your lifetime. Yeah, I went to that so and so place and there was no food. So, any celebration, so food is celebratory. Food is also psychological. So, as we discussed previously, that there is neural networks in your body that are associated with food. So, if you eat something sweet, those neural networks are pre-existing and you can adapt to a new sweet very easily. But if there are savory foods, these foods take a long time to develop new neural networks, so it takes longer. So food has its psychological impact too. There was a study that was done in Norway and I think various different conditions where they look at the youth reform centers. So when youth are involved in some criminal or civil activity which was not on par with what the rules of that land are, then they are sent to this reform facility. This was, I think, in Norway. And then what they did was all the kids in this group were divided into two groups. One got all the junk food. That means lots of chips, lots of fried foods, and so on, and whatever they wanted. And the second group got foods which were rich in minerals, rich in vitamins, and so on. And then they looked at both the groups and randomly, these groups were created randomly, and they looked at what are their likelihood of aggressive behaviors,
Okay.
what are their likelihood of once they leave this facility, what are their likelihood of coming back? So the recidivism rate, what are those rates between them? And there was significant difference between the two groups, that once they got all the minerals and the vitamins and so on, their aggression was much lesser and their likelihood of coming back with this criminal activity back to that facility was also significantly lower. So food has a psychological impact, food has a celebratory impact, and food as one is that builds your body too. And that's where one has to be extremely careful as to what we not ingest highly processed and synthetic foods, and eat more natural. So I can't label 3 foods for you, but then as long as it is natural, and try to get 40% of your food you eat for your calorific needs, for the energy needs, and then the way we extract energy could cause actually inflammation. So 60% should be our raw foods, and they should come from the greens, the vegetables, the fruits, dry fruits, nuts, and so on.
So, and my last question is, what message would you like to give to my audience?
The one message I would like to give it to your audience is don't eat foods that don't spoil with time. In our world and in natural world, any natural food would spoil, because if you don't eat it, somebody else would eat it. And any foods that has very, very long shelf life, they don't spoil with time,
Okay.
are not worth for human consumption. Because your body, if you look at, it's not just you. There are amazingly good bacteria in your body. So if you are eating something with preservatives, so let me tell you a story here, a little story. So when this research came about human genome,
Okay.
and they started looking at bacteria, they found that in our body, there are 10 times more bacteria than our own cells. So at that time, I was having lunch with a colleague of mine. Edgar Ben Joseph was his name, and he is a radiation oncologist. And I told him, so Edgar, it looks like they're all within us everywhere, and more of them than us. And why are we so scared of them? And his point of view was very amazing, and that stayed with me for a long time. And he said, look at it, Swaroop. their number is much higher than ours, our numbers, are like our cells. So it is not that they are within us, it is we are within them, because the bacteria are much more than us. So if you look at, there is this kind of a symbiotic relationship
Yes.
between various different, we have worms in our body, we have fungus in our body, we have bacteria and so on. We have a symbiotic relation, and if we are eating foods that are rich in preservatives, then what they do is they are inhibiting the growth of bacteria. So if they are inhibiting the growth of bacteria outside us, they will also inhibit the growth of bacteria within us. So these kind of foods is something that you should avoid. If bacteria can't eat them, then you should not eat them too. And that would be my one message, that any foods that does not spoil with time, with shorter period of time, then I think it's not worth for human consumption.
Okay. So thank you, sir, for coming my podcast.
Oh, pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Yes.